I'm very grateful to the BBVA for this award for a couple of important reasons. First of all, it's an international award, and the subjects in the category in which I fall is very international in importance. And a second reason is that the subjects, although they are gaining in prominence and public attention, still rank well down below many of the other subjects of science in attention and support. And then another reason is that the nature of the BBVA Foundation Frontiers in Knowledge Award is so welcome, is that it recognizes the importance of totality of knowledge. And there's a special reason for why that's significant. It is that we have recently in science, particularly biology, gone through a brilliant period of what can be called reductionism, that is discovering the better and better degree the structure and the processes of organisms at the molecular and cell level. And we've been adding a lot of knowledge about the other levels of organization up to and including the ecosystem and evolution, but we're really still in an early stage of putting all the places in their proper pieces in their proper places and connecting the dots. So whereas the 20th century for biology was very much the triumphant era of reductionism in research and knowledge and growth of knowledge, the 21st century is already becoming the age of synthesis. And that's where ecology and conservation biology fit. They are very much synthetic subjects. I introduced the word biodiversity. It was back in 1986 at a conference, and then in 1988 in a book of the proceedings of that conference. In order to put a label on a field that was beginning to take form. Of course, for centuries we've been studying classification and diversity of organisms, but for the first time in the 80s we saw clearly that there were many dimensions to studying biodiversity. And at that conference we put together what those dimensions were and I added the name biodiversity in the report of it. And they included not just exploration and discovery of biodiversity, but also the applications of knowledge of the diversity and all the varieties of microorganisms and plants and animals to other studies in biology, and furthermore, increasingly, to human welfare in medicine, agriculture, in creating new products and the like. So biodiversity studies has become a central synthetic subject in biology, technology, and in knowledge as a whole. We need all of the attention and support we can get in ecology and conservation science because they are still hugely underfunded, particularly in comparison with other fields of science. And we need to get started on deeper and more wide-ranging studies of these subjects, biodiversity, and then the underpinning it provides for conservation practice, because so much of biodiversity is disappearing each year. I and many others are concerned that these are subjects, biodiversity studies in ecology and conservation practice. Biodiversity studies are fundamental to both of those domains. It's still sadly misunderstood and paid too little attention by our policymakers. We are in great need of finding out what is on this little known planet. It's quite possible that when you include microorganisms and insects and other small invertebrate animals, that we know fewer than 10% of all of the species on the planet. And we ask, how can we really understand the ecosystems and build sustainable environments on the earth and when we don't know much of the living creatures that are on it? So I'm hoping that maybe this award, maybe the BBVA is in recognizing it, and I hope there'll be more focus in the future this way on these subjects, will raise attention in the public, and therefore it will follow attention on the part of our policymakers in government and our intellectuals too. The last thing we want to do or should do in this year, 2011, is to give in to defeatism and say, well, humanity expands, humanity needs all of the space that it can get. We need to devote the world to humanity. We just don't have enough room to save most of the rest of life. And this is fallacious, this argument, if it's still made, and I suppose that it is in some places, because, first of all, human population is not going to grow indefinitely, at least certainly not to the point where we all our civilizations collapse. The latest estimates are that human population will peak somewhere in the vicinity of about 10 billion. That's 40% increase over what we have now. But we can handle that if we manage the environment properly. If we make careful studies of what has to be done to turn the entire planet into a sustainable system that'll last for centuries. So my argument is that first, we must do this for our own good, for humanity's benefit, however we manage to achieve it, and for the benefit of the rest of life, which is beginning to disappear. The variety of it is disappearing. And we need then to make the study of the variety of plants and animals and the way they're put together in ecosystems, give it a priority right up there with medicine and economic policy. Of course, I'm personally typically identified with ants because I've been studying ants since I was a little boy. In fact, 9 or 10 years old. I decided I'd be working on the insects like this, and I was already, by the time I got to college, I decided to focus on them. And that's not a bad thing to do, you know. It turns out that ants alone make up, according to the part of the world you're in, somewhere around a quarter to over 1/3 of the biomass of all the insects. In other words, if you take all the insects in the world living and you weigh them, then ants alone would make up, say, roughly a quarter or a third of the weight of all those insects. So ants are everywhere. I call them the little things that run the world, and the more we know about them, the better ecology and the better biology we'll produce. But there's another good reason for studying a group like this. You know, ants are the most advanced social creatures on Earth other than humans. The most advanced of the species among them have social organizations that have taken us generations to work out and see the complexity in it. And a great deal of the study of the understanding that we have of the of the process of memory. It comes from studying mollusks, relatives of snails. So it should not seem so odd that we would derive from the study of ants, and particularly their social organization and the way they communicate and their impact on the environment, principles of biology that are useful to apply in the broadest sense to human biology and human welfare.